Raiders got the first day of practice officially in the books on Wednesday, so I'll give you my reaction to what I was able to see, plus a couple roster moves that the Raiders made. That plus a whole lot more on Thursday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for July 25th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. The show grows each and every day, and that's because of your support. And my man Ari does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, and we're sounding good. So we shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Real quick note on our YouTube page, if you go to that throughout the course of the day, I will give you a 1-minute recap of what I saw from training camp. That's something that we're doing across the Locked On Podcast Network for the NFL channel. So I'm trying to make sure I bang that out each and every day. And just a real quick 1-minute summary of what happened at training camp. And, of course, give you the full meal deal thing here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. But if you're into the YouTube thing, if you're into YouTube shorts, that's basically what it is. And we're trying to make that an addition as well. Continue to grow and evolve our YouTube page. So definitely appreciate all the support we get of that. Like I said, the show grows in a major way. You want to be a part of the show, you can do that at 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts. That's coming up, segment number 3. A lot of feedback. We get a lot of feedback each and every day. I try to get as many calls in as possible. I always tell everyone it's never anything personal. It's never because you don't agree with me. You don't like what I said. You say something that you think Raider Nation is going to find controversial. It's never that why a call doesn't get on. It's just that there's so many calls. And so I try to get as many in as possible. I try not to have the usual suspects each and every day because I want to try to, show the love and spread the love a little bit. I know everyone doesn't like that all the time, but I try to be as fair as possible and try to get as many, different thoughts and just contributions to the show. Try to do as much of that as possible. So we'll do that coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts. Segment number 2, I'll give you a full meal deal recap of what I saw from day 1 of practice at the Jack Hammett Sports Complex here in Costa Mesa, where the Raiders are at. And, of course, they'll go ahead and get back to work later on today or later on this morning, depending on what time you're listening to this. But excited about the fact that you're seeing football being played and being practiced on the field as they prepare for the 2024 season, and they try to put together the best 53-man roster. So we'll give you the full meal deal recap. That'll come up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes, and it's really a few transactions. Really, the headliner is some transactions that the Raiders made on Wednesday. We'll get into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Of course, I'll tell you more about them later on in the show. Off top, the Raiders did make some roster moves on Wednesday. I had talked about it on Wednesday's show. We had found out on Tuesday about the guys that were going on the PUP list. The Raiders had 5 of them, but the key contributors were Colton Miller on the PUP list, JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson on the PUP list. Michael Gallup actually retired, so he didn't go on the PUP list, but he retired, the wide receiver. And then Jalen Guyton, the wide receiver, also he was on the PUP list, or is on the PUP list, so that left a hole at the wide receiver position. And then Jake Johanning was another guy, the 5th guy that wasn't going to be practicing because he was being put on the PUP list. So corresponding moves that basically left the Raiders with 89 guys on the current roster. Of course, they can hold 90 guys, so you figured that they were going to make a move sooner rather than later. Well, they made a couple moves on Wednesday, and the first one is they brought back a guy from 2019 that everyone who watched Hard Knocks should be very familiar with, and that was the hometown kid. And I say hometown because at that time the Raiders were the Oakland Raiders, and I'm talking about Alameda's own wide receiver, Keelan Doss. Now, you remember he made a big splash. He was the Hard Knocks celebrity, right? There's always a guy on Hard Knocks that someone never falls in love with. Like, yeah, this is a hell of a player. Man, you got to hold on to that guy. Or there's some storyline that comes out of Hard Knocks that, is kind of a cool one. And Keelan Doss being the hometown kid was a cool storyline. Obviously, he didn't hold on and stick around with the silver and black, but he did play last season with the Chargers. So he played in 5 games, caught 6 passes for 33 yards. Obviously, he's familiar with Tom Telesco. Tom Telesco's familiar with him. They had a roster spot. They had 2 wide receivers, 1 retired, 1 on the PUP list. They went out and got a guy that they are very familiar with, both the Raiders and Tom Telesco, and wide receiver Keelan Doss. Then also, they signed offensive lineman Corey Luciano. Luciano saw action in 2 games as a rookie for the 49ers last season after signing with the Niners as an undrafted free agent following the 2023 NFL Draft. He's actually a guy from Danville, California, so shout out Danville. Used to go to Danville all the time. Matter of fact, went to Del Amigo. Finished my high school career there at Del Amigo, right there in Danville, right behind San Ramon High. So there's that. He played in 35 games with 13 starts in 4 years at Washington after transferring from DVC, Diablo Valley College, right there in Concord. Another place that I went to for a little while, and I only went to school to check out the girls and talk to them, so I didn't really do anything at DVC, but it's funny to see places that you frequent and went to all the time. And like I said, I spent a little bit of time there at DVC. And then as a senior in 2022, Luciano received 3rd team All Pac-12 honors after starting all 13 games at center. So obviously he's a guy that has a little bit of versatility, and with JPJ and Colton Miller both being down, they wanted to add some offensive linemen to that room. An additional transaction, the Raiders waived injured guard Jake Johanning, the guy that started out the training camp on the PUP list. He is now waived with the injury. So there you go. No more guard Jake Johanning. Instead, Corey Luciano is in. Wide receiver Keelan Doss is in. And we still wait on JPJ. We still wait on Colton Miller. We still wait on Tyler Guyton. So we'll see what happens with those guys sooner rather than later. And I found this to be interesting as I'm here in Costa Mesa, still trying to get the lay of the land. I'm cruising around. I've been having some suggestions on places to go get some food. And with my crazy busy schedule, I don't really get a chance to do that very often. But whenever I'm in the car, I like to listen to local radio. So I've been spending a lot of time listening to ESPN LA, which I believe is 710 a.m. I've been listening to that quite a bit. And, we're not supposed to be promoting that the Raiders are here in Costa Mesa in Southern California in the Rams, and I say that in air quotes if you're watching on YouTube, the Rams and the Chargers, that they have the territorial rights. So we're not supposed to be promoting the Raiders. The Raiders aren't supposed to be promoting them, and they're not. And I'm not promoting them either. But it's funny when I turn on the local radio and I hear their local shows talking about all the different teams that are participating and practicing and having training camp in the Southern California area. And they point out the Raiders are in Costa Mesa at Jack Hammett Sports Complex. This is from them, not me. They're talking about it. I'm sitting there listening. I'm driving in the car and I'm listening. And, they're talking about them being in Costa Mesa. And it's like, yeah, but they're not allowed to promote it while the whole time they're talking about it. So anyone who may not have known that the Raiders were here is listening and is like, oh, wow, the Raiders are here. And they're not only doing that, but they're telling them the location. Yeah, well, they're not supposed to promote it. They can't have fans there because it's the Chargers and the Rams. It's their home territory. And then you hear guys talking about, I wouldn't let them be here anyway. It's about money. They're taking money out of the pockets of the Rams and the Chargers. They shouldn't. But they're going on and on and on and spending all this time with the Raiders in LA. And then they're talking about, yeah, but they have a huge fan base. So, if think about this, if you're a Raider fan, you live in LA and you know that your favorite team is having training camp right down the street at Jack Hammett Sports Complex, and they're saying that all the time in Costa Mesa, and then you can't go, you're going to be disappointed. Well, all you're doing is pointing everyone to where the Raiders are at. I bring this up because as the first day of practice happened on Wednesday, I got to the facility really early. I got there at 6:30. Practice didn't even start till 10, but I got there at 6:30 in the morning as I was helping the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 get ready so they can do their show from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. So I got there at 6:30. I'm hearing at 8 o'clock, there's fans across the street from Jack Hammett just hanging out, right? Yeah, fans can't come in, right? They're not allowed to promote that they're there. But as other radio stations and other outlets are talking about it, and again, it's not like it's some secret. Everyone knows the Raiders are here. It's just funny hearing these local radio stations go on and on and on and on. All they're doing is driving more traffic to the Raiders where they're at. And not to mention, they're also driving more anger towards the Rams and the Chargers for not allowing them to be at the Jack Hammett Sports Complex and basically saying, no, we're going to flex our muscles and not allow you to be there. And so it was just funny. I'm just driving in the car, and when you look over and you see someone like doing something, you're like, I wonder what the hell they're doing. And you just see them laughing, and they ain't got nobody in the car with them. I'm literally laughing. And I'm sure someone's probably looking at me like, what the hell is he? What's so funny? Is he looking in the mirror? Has he got a booger on his nose? What's so funny? Why is he laughing so much? But I was just laughing because, well, they were talking so much about it. And it was almost like, I don't want to say they were angry, but it was almost like, yeah, I wouldn't allow the Raiders to be there anyway. So the Raiders got everybody talking, man. And it really feels good to know that, as I'm riding around, I got the Nevada Al Davis license plates on the car, right? I'm feeling good about myself. I'm walking around in my Raider Nation Radio 920 polo shirt, and I'm pulling up wherever I'm going to get something to eat or whatever. And folks are noticing. They know exactly what's going on. So I thought I just had to pass that along because I found that pretty humorous on Wednesday when I heard that on a local radio here in the Southern California area. Again, ESPN 710 LA, and they do a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong. That's a fantastic radio station. A lot of great talent on that station, but it was funny to hear them go on and on and on and really talk about the silver and black. And then they're like, oh, but we'll be at Rams training camp tomorrow. We'll be there next week as well. And it's just, again, it was funny to me. For today at Raiders training camp, before practice actually gets started, practice will get started at 10. It'll go to about noon. Defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, he'll speak with the media around 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. So you want to hear from the leader of the Raiders defense. Patrick Graham is the dude. 9:30 in the morning. The last few times we've had a chance to talk to him, he's been pretty detailed with his conversation. So I look forward to hearing from what the defensive coordinator has to say about his unit that we all expect to be really good and be the leaders of the team. So Patrick Graham will speak with the media at 9:30 this morning. But what happened on Wednesday, Q? Since fans aren't allowed to be there and you can only, take pictures and videos and tweet them out for a certain amount of time, how did practice look on Wednesday? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll get to that right after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Gametime. Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. Great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. And I'm glad we're talking about baseball tickets because I had my good friend Bill, who lives in Pittsburgh, California, a big A's fan, and I'm an A's fan as well, not of the ownership, but of the team. Grew up an A's fan, will always be an A's fan, but just don't like the current ownership. And he actually sent me, a message about how the A's, John Fisher and company, raised the ticket prices to the last home game there at the Coliseum. The last game ever at the Oakland Coliseum, they raised that ticket price to the point where, like, in the third deck, it's like $100-something a ticket, which is ridiculous. We all know that that's not what it should be. And if you're trying to really kick your fan base in the stones while they're down, that's what you do. But the good news is if you do want to go to that game and celebrate the Coliseum one more time, Gametime has got you covered. Again, you can get those last-minute tickets at a very much cheaper price. Wait till the last second. Again, Gametime, they got the hookup, last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever the case may be, you can get the hookup. But if it's Major League Baseball tickets, they definitely have that for you. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying those Major League Baseball tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms to apply. Create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL, all one word for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into just what the vibe was like day one of Raiders training camp. Of course, it was exciting just to be back out there. I mentioned in segment number 1, I was out there at 6:30 in the morning, and practice didn't even start till 10 a.m. But I was out there trying to help the morning tailgate, make sure that they got on air by 7 o'clock and, just doing some behind-the-scenes type work. But I was glad and blessed to be out there, got out there and was able to see people arrive. There were a handful of fans there, just some season ticket holders, some folks that were invited. I shouldn't say guys because it was young ladies. There was, kids, family, just a handful of people that were selected to be there, sponsors as well. It wasn't very much at all, but they were there. The music was playing, right? You could just see that there was a good energy with everyone that was working with the Raiders, trying to get the field all up to snuff and get it all ready to go. Saw when the goalposts were brought in. And, again, it was just, you could just tell that there was something special in the air, which was just football was back, right? We got an opportunity to talk to AP on Tuesday. You could tell he was excited for the opportunity, but you could tell that all the players were excited to be back. All the coaches were excited to be back, right? The fans were there were happy to see the Raiders back out there on the field, and the ones that were there were representing, man. They were loud and proud. Raiders, right? Every time they did that chant, it was loud. Right, and there was only a handful of fans there, so I got to give the fans some props. I also want to give the fans some props that I was actually able to meet. Had a few people that came up to me and was like, hey, man, I listen to you every day. Your first listen every day. Appreciate the show. You did a good job. And I was like, dang, that's awesome, right? It's always, it's always such a blessing when you meet the folks that listen to you, and sometimes people tell me what the show means to them when they listen to the show, what the opportunity is, what they like, what they don't like, all that good stuff, man. And I always want to make sure that I make myself available. So if you ever see me wherever it is, just say, hey, what's up, Q? I'd love to stop and talk with you and chop it up, talk some Raiders football, and just get to know you a little bit. Like I said, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I definitely want to take the time to listen to you and kind of get to know you and, get to know what makes you tick. And thank you so much for listening to the show. But I'm telling you, man, the soundtrack was awesome. There was a point of the practice where I'm standing next to Vic Tafer from The Athletic, and I goes, man, am I watching practice or am I listening to this soundtrack? It was, old hip hop vibe and, Southern California hip hop vibe, LA, old school hip hop feeling. I mean, it was a good feeling. And, to be able to have the ability to walk from, field to field, and especially in the first 4 sessions where it's like individual drills, stretching drills, you can't roam around practice the whole time, but really have a lot better access than we did the last couple of seasons under the last staff. And, I'm not trying to poo-poo on them, but it's just what it is. They were very conservative with what they allowed us to see, what they allowed us to do. And AP and this staff is not tripping. Right. They're like, okay, you could do this, that, and the other. Just go ahead and, do what you got to do. And so it's a lot looser. Like I said, man, the coaches that were there was a point where Ricky Manning, the cornerback coach, threw me a pass. Right. He had thrown a pass to one of the young ladies from the PR department, Ashley, and she dropped the ball. And he was like, man, I was expecting more from you. I'm a little disappointed. Then he looked around. He's like, who got some hands, man? Let me throw the ball to someone got some hands. So, me, I'm like, I'm here, coach. I got you. So he throws me the ball. I catch it, tuck it under my arm. So I make sure I, bring it in and everything. He's like, oh, that was too easy. And I was thinking to myself, man, glad I didn't drop that. That would have been embarrassing if I dropped that. I got everybody looking at me and everything. But again, you could just tell, big smile on the coach's face. The players were energized. And as Eric Allen, who was there, Amber Thea Harris was there doing some stuff for Raiders.com. Eric Allen told me, he's like, Q, this is the best day of training camp. This is the day that every single player feels the best. The very first day, you don't have a bunch of bumps and bruises. Your body's not sore. Your back's not hurt. You're not coming off a loss. Like, today is the best day. This is the best day of the season. You'll never feel as good as you feel right now when everything starts. And, of course, Eric Allen had a long-time career in the NFL. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I'm hoping that he has that opportunity to get a chance to get into the Hall of Fame this upcoming year. But, I listen to guys like that. So, when it comes to the action on the field, of course, everyone's talking about the quarterback competition, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew. And, I thought that both guys looked good for day one. I don't think that it was, a super fast-paced practice, something that AP had mentioned on Tuesday, that there was not going to be a ramp-up period, that they were going to, just hit the ground running and go. Well, they didn't really necessarily hit the ground running. They weren't, full steam ahead. They did look like, though, they picked up right where they left off in the spring. It didn't look like, they were taking steps back. It looked like, okay, they were jumping into the offense. They were ready to run it. They were ready to go. Gardner Minshew was out there. O'Connell was out there. Both dudes looked like they had a good day, right? There wasn't drop passes. There wasn't bad throws. There was one bad throw from Anthony Brown, and he dropped down and dropped and got like 15 or 20 push-ups, knocked him out real quick for making a bad throw. But that was something that he imposed on himself. Like, he's going to just do it because he made a bad read. But, the quarterbacks look pretty solid. Brock Bowers looks very fast, right? I know we've said that many times, but they got on the ball many different ways. And, he caught that rock, and once he gets the ball in his hands, boom, he's gone. Right, Devontae Adams looked very confident out there. He looked happy to be out there. He spoke with us after practice. Him, Max Crosby, Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, they all spoke with us after practice, and they were just glad to be out there. And look, it's going to be, again, AP said no ramp-up period. It's going to be a little bit of ramp-up period before they actually get just going. But going up against that defense is going to be a challenge, right? There were some things that I saw that I like from, just the offensive standpoint, just getting the ball into the playmakers' hands and let them do what they do. It looked like, Minshew was rolling out a little bit. Aiden O'Connell was getting the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. There was a time when, you saw Devontae go in motion. Then you saw him go in motion again, stop, set, boom, hit the outside real quick. The ball got in his hands. It looked like, just quick, precise, on-time passes, which is what matters in this West Coast offense, right? We still haven't seen the run game really evolve just because, again, pads aren't on. They're not on till Tuesday, but we know that that's going to obviously be a big part of the offense as well. So on Wednesday, it was really just kind of getting these guys' feet wet, getting them back acclimated. Again, it wasn't anything like they took steps back from mandatory minicamp. It looks like they really picked up where they left off, but they also weren't going 100 miles an hour. So we'll see their pads come on Tuesday. We'll see obviously some more from them today. We'll see them ramped up. The defense still looks really good. I didn't see any blown assignments. I saw guys, going from station to station. Guys like Crosby and Christian Wilkins continue to, push each other, which I think is great. Right, as long as those two guys are pushing each other, the rest of the defense is going to follow and get in line. Right, and so that was really good to see. Aiden O'Connell did, in fact, get the first team reps, as we all knew he was going to get them. But to me, it looked pretty split. It looked pretty even. Like both guys were getting some pretty quality reps, with the one. So I think that's how it's going to be. I don't know when this quarterback competition is going to get solved. I think it's going to take some preseason games just before they can actually see what they look like against someone else, since they don't have any joint practices. But then again, going up against that defense each and every day should help as well, because that defense is not going to back down. They're going to continue to come. They're going to be, fired up. They're going to be, trying to make life difficult on the offense, and that's only going to help improve them. So that's good. But obviously, Colton Miller and JPJ not being out there, still something to kind of monitor and pay attention to. I was talking to Vic Tafer, and I asked him, when would you be concerned with those guys being on the PUP list? And he said, well, if they're not back by next week, then I'm going to start getting a little concerned. Middle of next week, they're not back, then there's a little bit of concern right there. I mean, this offensive line, they've got to be able to gel. That's the one unit that you just can't have guys that all of a sudden you just plug them in at the, okay, no problem, just go in and go to work. It's just not that simple, man. These guys have to be in lockstep with each other. We know that for an offensive line to gel. They're having a new offensive line scheme, a new run blocking scheme. They've got to be in the trenches, putting in the work, especially next Tuesday when they put on the pads. That's when the offensive line can start to get physical, going up against the defensive line. You can start to see what these guys are made of. So hoping that they're back sooner rather than later. As I mentioned on Wednesday's show, I'm not going to act like sky is falling. I'm not going to be that guy, but I am monitoring it. I am paying attention to it. And, the thing about JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, my understanding on Wednesday was that it was a shoulder injury. Then later on Wednesday, when I'm actually at practice, I'm talking to a couple people, and they're like, hey, I was told it's not the shoulder. It's not a shoulder injury. It's something else. But at the same time was told, they don't know. They didn't say what the other thing was. Like they weren't told. The person who was telling me said that no one confirmed what it was, but it wasn't a shoulder injury. So I honestly, I don't want to lie to you. I don't know. If I knew what it was, I'd tell you. But from my understanding, it was shoulder, and then I'm hearing that it's not a shoulder. So we'll see exactly what it is. But I'm hoping that JPJ of all people, needs as many reps as possible. But all those guys, as far as the offensive line together, they need to get all the reps together and so they can get in lockstep with each other. But the defense still looks like the defense. Guys still flying around, making plays. Obviously, they're not tackling. Spent a lot of time, again, on special teams. Dylan Lobby, to me, still looks like a really good special team guy. Looks like a guy who's going to get a lot of burn in the return game. He's going to get a lot of burn on kick coverage. I feel like he's really going to butter his bread by that way. And they spent plenty of time on special teams. They actually spent, I feel like, more time on special teams than they did offense versus defense, right? Team drills. I think they went to the team drills maybe once, at least once, maybe twice. But as far as I'm concerned, the special teams, they spent probably more time than that, and that's something that we anticipated. So, again, nothing too earth-shattering for day one. It wasn't like, oh, man, this guy stood out and looked fantastic. None of that. But it looked like it was a solid day one. It was a good first day of school. Let's put it like that. Can they have a second day of school? We'll find out later on today when they practice. We'll talk to Patrick Graham this morning. We'll find out exactly what he's looking for, what he's expecting, especially with the additions of Christian Wilkins on that defensive line and how they can continue to evolve. So that's really, as far as recaps, that's really all I got for this segment and for day one of training camp. Like I said, it wasn't overwhelming, but it wasn't underwhelming. And the overall feeling was everybody was happy to be back. Lots of smiles, but that's how it is across the league early in training camp. Everyone's happy. Everyone's the best versions of themselves. Every team has a chance to go make a deep playoff run. Everything is rainbows and puppy dogs early in training camp. then you start to stack days, and you start to see, and you'll start to see different teams separate themselves, and you'll see different players separate themselves from the rest of the pack. So as that continues to evolve, we'll continue to talk about it here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. And as I mentioned before, if you're checking out the YouTube page every day after practice, I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make sure I do a 1-minute quick video on what we saw from practice, what we heard from practice, and what our overall feelings were. So that's just a quick summary. And then, of course, I'll come here and break it down more on the Locked On Raiders podcast. But I do want to hear from you, your calls and texts, 707-654-4693. That's coming up in segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before I get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. With passion, drive, and patience, that's the formula for winning championships. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Anything from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and a whole lot more. Matter of fact, my guy Jason, it sounds like that's like Christmas for him. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights. Jason's probably like, give me all of that and more. So whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. They've got over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts are after that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Went a little long there in segment 1 and 2, so we'll try to get as many calls in as possible, but won't be able to squeeze in too many. Let's start out with Billy G from SoCal. He's calling to talk about the Raiders not being allowed to have fans and having to adhere to the 75-mile radius and why the Cowboys do not, and they practice in Oxnard, California. Here he is, Billy G from SoCal.
Q, love your show. Billy G from SoCal. As the Raiders come to do their training camp at Costa Mesa, I want to remind you, you probably heard this voicemail again, but the Cowboys practice in Oxnard, which is about 45 miles away from downtown L.A. I don't understand. They have a huge following. They've got games, rides, attractions, and everybody can go. And if you remember, several years back, Cowboys and the Raiders actually did, training camp together at that location. So I don't understand why or how the NFL created this 75-mile rule and why the Cowboys, who practice in Oxnard, again, that's in Southern California, just north of L.A., why they can have fans there and the Raiders can't. Again, another double standard by the NFL. Hope you get this message, Cube. Love your show. Keep it up. Talk to you soon.
Billy, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And, yeah, I'm very well aware of the Cowboys in Oxnard. I actually used to work for a station in Central Texas, ESPN Central Texas. We covered the Cowboys. We sent a team out to Oxnard every year for a training camp, and it was fantastic, right? There was plenty of coverage, and, the fans were there. But the Cowboys they're grandfathered in, right? The Rams had left L.A. The Chargers were in San Diego. So the Cowboys slid into Oxnard, and they made that home. And then the Rams came back, and then the Chargers moved to L.A. Well, the Cowboys are already grandfathered in, so they have the lay of the land. They can do what they want to do. Not to mention the reason why Stan Kroenke and the Rams are actually in L.A. A lot of that has to do with Jerry Jones. So Jerry's going to get what Jerry wants, right? When he's the one who really helped orchestrate the fact that SoFi Stadium's even there where it is here in the L.A. area. So. So they're not moving the Cowboys out. But, the funny thing is like nobody cares that the Saints are practicing out here, right? If the Texans were practicing out here, nobody would care that they're practicing, right? I mean, any team could be practicing, but it's the Raiders who have such a stranglehold of the fan base here. It's intimidating to the Chargers and the Rams. They're going to lose money on, tickets being bought or fans attending. They're going to lose money. And of course, they're not going to be able to build up their fan base because all the Raider fans are going to be there. It's just going to kind of, take over their area, not to mention big-time sponsors. And, it's always about sponsorships, right? So, if the Raiders were able to advertise that they're here, a lot of businesses would say, hey, let's advertise with them because we know Raider Nation rolls deep, and they're going to be way more of them than there is of those guys. So there's a lot of different reasons why the Raiders aren't being allowed to advertise it. A lot of it's economics, a lot of it's ego. But I'll tell you this, they don't need to advertise and promote that. They don't need billboards saying that, hey, we're here. Everyone knows the Raiders are in Costa Mesa. Everyone knows that they're at the Jack Hammett Sports Complex. They talk about it, as I mentioned in segment number 1, on local radio, right? They're talking about it in great detail. So if you didn't know, now you know. That's how it goes down. But just the unfortunate part is that the fans aren't allowed to be in there and enjoy the vibe and get the energy up for the players as well to be able to, operate and do what they do. But thanks for the call. I do appreciate you. Got a text from 725 Raiders. Says, hey, Q, 725 Raider here. Out of curiosity, did the Raiders organization know they couldn't promote themselves in Costa Mesa before or after they agreed to hold training camp there? Will they have it there again next year? And thanks for the text. I appreciate you. And, yeah, I believe they found out following Costa Mesa City Council approving them. And it's funny, if you listen to that City Council meeting when the Raiders were approved to be here in Costa Mesa, just to the proof of how deep the Raider fandom rolls, like everyone on the Costa Mesa City Council, like all the ones that had to approve it, they were giddy about the Raiders, right? That's all they were talking. They were like gushing over the Raiders. So if they were given that kind of, response, then that just kind of lets you know already, what the fan base is like. And they're, oh man, my parents are season ticket holders, or they were, they used to be season ticket holders. My first football game was at the LA Coliseum. And like, that's all they were saying. You can go back to the episode. I don't know the date, but I mean, the podcast, you can hear the city council people talking to the Raiders representation, and they're, man, we love these guys. Yeah, we definitely want them here. So I can only imagine, right, how many fans would, if they were allowed to have fans at Jack Hammett, how it would be packed to the gills with fans. It would be awesome. And no, I don't think they're going to have it here again next year. Tom Telesco kind of alluded to that before mandatory minicamp got got wrapped up. I should say it didn't get ripped off. It got wrapped up. But he did mention that he enjoys having fans at camp because it does provide extra energy for the players. So I think that what he's going to do is try to find a location next year where fans could be in attendance and really enjoy what the Raiders are doing. And like I said, go out there and provide that energy. Thanks so much for that text. I appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Nick D in Wilmington, Cali. He's calling to share his story on how he became a Raider fan. Here he is, Nick D.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is Nick D from Wilmington, Cali, man. I just want to let you know how I became a Raider fan, man. This was back in '88 when the Niners won the Super Bowl. I was just getting into football, and so I went to go buy a 49ers hat. So I just went with the flow, and then I was sitting down in church, and my uncle passed by. He's a diehard Raider fan, and he looked at my hat and laughed and said, "Why are you wearing that?" So then a few months later, at the Coliseum in L.A., he took me to a game, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fans, and that's how I became a Raider fan back in '89. Shout out my Uncle Javier and Raider Nation. Thanks a lot, Q. Have a good day.
Big Nick, what's up, my man? Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And shout out to Uncle Javier, who saved you from the ways of the Crimson and the Flamme, a.k.a. the 49ers. And he saved you in church. So literally, he saved you and brought you to the dark side. I guess that reference probably didn't work. I tried. You saw what I was going for there. Like, in my mind, that was creative, and it was working, and I was on the right path, but saved you in church and took you to the dark side. That probably wasn't the right reference. But you get what I'm saying. Saw you in church with the 49er hat on and was like, no, you can't do that. So shout out to Uncle Javier. Everyone needs an Uncle Javier in their life, right, to make sure that they're with the right team and not with that team. So, Nick, thanks so much for sharing that story, man. Definitely appreciate you. And let's get one more text in. How about we get this one in from Peter in Winnipeg? Says, AQ is Peter from Winnipeg. I find it a bit puzzling. These NFL experts hold it against Devontae that he's got questionable quarterback play, but they don't seem to hold it against Justin Jefferson for the upcoming season. After Cousins got hurt last year, he was very hot and cold. He had a couple big games with 192 and 141 yards, but then he had games of 59, and the Raiders held him to 27. I'm sure if you polled players and coaches, the majority would take our quarterbacks over Darnold, who seem to be the star in many. I'm hoping that the Raiders will be able to make a lot of experts around the league say their words, eat their words this upcoming season. Take care and go Raiders. And he says, oh, and I forgot to mention, I'd love if the Raiders held next year's training camp 80 miles from L.A. next year, 5 miles past the NFL requirement for the Rams and the Chargers. I think it would be a very Al Davis move. That's Peter in Winnipeg. And as long as there's room to do it, then they would do it. If there's a spot where they can do it, like a Jack Hammett, they would do it. There just happens to be so many different complexes that these teams can come to and hold their camp at, and it makes a lot of sense. So they could be looking for that spot right now, and it very well might be 80 miles away instead of 75, or within that 75-mile radius. So thanks so much for that. And you're right about quarterback play, and nobody talking about Justin Jefferson and his quarterback play. Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy is a big unknown, and Sam Darnold is so much of an unknown. We don't even have to talk about him. We all know who he is, and it's not very good. So, yeah, I'm with you. Minshew and O'Connell, I would take them every day of the week and twice on Sunday over Sam Darnold. Justin Jefferson last year also was pretty banged up, right? He got hurt. He even got hurt again in the Raider game. So that's part of the reason why he was only held to 27 yards. Not to mention the Vikings had no offense. They scored 3 points and the Raiders scored 0. So that game was 0 offense for both teams, right? And only because the Raiders had a turnover, they didn't score any points. They were in the red zone to score, and that's when Hunter Renfrow fumbled. So when he fumbled and the ball went back to Minnesota, it felt to me, as a guy sitting in Allegiant Stadium in the press box, that was their opportunity to get that score, and they didn't get to do it. And so Minnesota, for their credit, it took 2 quarterbacks to get 3 points. So it was a very defensive game, clearly. But thanks, Peter, for the text. I do appreciate you, and that's all I got time for on today's show. Like I said, went a little long in segment number 1 and 2, but still got a call from Army Raider, a call from Stevie from Antioch, California. We'll get to those tomorrow. We'll get to some text tomorrow as well. Plus, we'll talk about what we saw from Thursday's practice on anything that Patrick Graham happens to say this morning. If it's something that I think really stands out, we'll bring it to the table as well. But it'll be day 2 of the training camp officially in the books. And, well, we look forward to seeing what it looks like, hearing what it looks like, and being able to come back here on the Locked On Raiders podcast and talk about it. Again, thanks so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to check out other shows on the Locked On Podcast Network, you can. We've got all 32 teams represented in the NFL. We've got over 200 total shows going over many different sports. You can check those out as well. The network continues to grow. They're doing a hell of a job. Definitely appreciate them. And most importantly, we appreciate you. So until tomorrow, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family, and as always, just win, baby.